Hello everyone and welcome back. It's Gina from orchidandopal.com, and today I am back with another tutorial, and this is for a bracelet that comes from the contents of the very recent Eureka Crystal Beads Cozy Winter collection. I just shared that unboxing and I will try to link that in the corner as well if you haven't seen that and would like to check it out. But of course you can find everything you need at Eureka Crystal Beads, whether it's in the collection or outside of it, depending on whether or not that collection has sold out. But either way, they have all of these types of beads in a variety of different colors, so they definitely have you covered. And I will leave the links and the list of all the materials you'll need right down below the video, as well as the quantities of everything. The bracelet that we'll be making today is going to end up being about 7.5 inches long, including the clasp. And for this design, I've opted to sew the clasp directly into the beadwork on both ends. Now the bottom necklace is the one that comes from the Cozy Winter collection in that white and cream and gold color palette. And that collection came with this magnetic clasp, but the other two are just toggles that I had on hand, and I'll be showing you how to sew in another toggle clasp in the example piece that we'll do together. For beading thread, I'll be using the 6-pound test 0.006 inch diameter FireLine beading thread and a size 11 beading needle, and of course you can use a size 10, 11, or 12, any of those would work. We're not going through really tiny 15-0 seed beads today, so a 10 or 11 should be just fine. And finally, if you're curious about any of the specific colors that I used in any of these examples, just stop by my blog post that corresponds with this video, and there I will have all that information listed and linked for you for each of these bracelets. For now though, you can go ahead and gather up your materials if you're going to be making one of these together with me. Thread your beading needle with a comfortable length of beading thread, and we will jump into this tutorial. Okay, so once you're ready to get started, I do want to just point out about these 2-hole crescent beads. I'll be referring to these 2 holes as left hand and right hand, and that is with the bead facing in this direction as if you're looking down at it, with the domed part at the top and the concave portion at the bottom. We'll also be completing the clasp portion of the bracelet at the very end, so we're going to start right into the beadwork, and then I'll do a demonstration of one end of sewing in the clasp, which you'll just repeat on the other side, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. To get started, you'll want to pick up one of your crescent beads going through the left-hand hole, just like this. Then pick up an 8-0, and then pick up another crescent bead going through also the left-hand hole. And then pull these beads down, and I suggest leaving about a 10 to 12 inch tail. That way you can use that tail at the end of your bracelet to sew on your clasp portion. That way you won't have to add on additional thread at that point. I'm working with a shorter piece of thread just as I do this tutorial, since we'll just be doing an example of the entire design, and that is why my tail thread portion will be shorter than what I'm suggesting. Now with your thread coming out of this hole on the left of the crescent, sew back through now the open hole of that same crescent bead. And by the way, you can use a stop bead if you'd like to. I'll be getting us started without one, and I'll show you how I like to get this started in a secure way. And now with my thread coming out of the right hand hole of that crescent, let's pick up another crescent, this time going through the right hand hole to pick it up. That one is going to sit staggered in the center of the first 2. So we're coming out of the left-hand side of that at the moment, and then we're going to go through the open hole of the very first crescent bead. And pull this together, holding that with both hands. And now sew up through the left hole of the crescent, the 8-0, and that next crescent bead again that are aligned. So you should have something that looks like this so far. And right now, to secure this in place, what I like to do is just go right under that thread bridge that is in between the 2 holes of the crescent bead, make a loop, and then sew directly through the loop, pulling nice and tight to make a half hitch knot and to just secure the beginning of our beadwork. And now that you've done that, you can go through the next 3 crescent beads, going through that next set of holes that is aligned. And after you make every addition, after every step, make sure you're pulling everything tightly. Now I'm coming out of the right-hand hole of this crescent, and I'm going to pick up a new crescent through the right-hand hole. And that's going to sit just like that. And we're going to take our needle and go through the open hole of that same crescent, and also go through that next one that's aligned in the center. Once again, pull tight. And now pick up another crescent going through the right-hand hole, pulling it down. It's going to sit like that, and then we're going to take our needle and go through the open hole of that same crescent, and then also pass through the additional 4 holes of the crescent beads that are aligned with that one, and pull. So we've got our crescent beads starting to be staggered like this. And I'm coming out of the left-hand side of this one. I'm going to take my needle and go through the right-hand hole of that very bottom one. And then we're just going to place 2 seed beads, one in each of these gaps in between the 3 crescents in this section. So pick up an 11-0, and then sew through the next crescent bead, again that right-hand hole. Pick up an 11-0, and sew through the next crescent bead through the right-hand hole, and pull. And that's what we should be looking like so far. And now we'll move on to our next step. Now we'll pick up 3 of our 11-0s, pick up a fire polish, and then 3 of our 11-0s. Pull them down. It's going to sit like this. And we're going to go back up through the section that we had just gone through: crescent, seed bead, and crescent. If you can get through all those at once, great. If not, just go through one at a time. And then sew through the first 3 11-0s again. And then sew down through the fire polish. And pull. Now we'll start to work on the other side of this section by picking up 3 more 11-0s, and then we're going to pick up 3 crescents, each of them going through the left-hand hole. Then pick up 3 more 11-0s. So you should have this on your needle. Pull them down. And then you can take your needle and sew down through the fire polish again, just looping those onto the side. And then sew through the 3 11-0s on the bottom right. Sew up through the same holes of the new crescent beads again, and then sew left through the next 3 11-0s. Now we're going to just be placing an 8-0 seed bead in between these sections of 3 11-0s. So I picked one up and I'm going through the next 3. Then I'm going to travel down through these crescents and 11-0s again. Turn that a little bit. Go through the next 3 11-0s. Pick up an 8-0. And then sew through the next 3 11-0s. And now it's just a matter of working on this section of crescents so that it mirrors what we have on this side. So first we're going to go up through the left-hand hole of the first crescent bead, pick up 1 11-0, and sew through the left-hand hole of the next crescent bead. Repeat that, pick up an 11-0, and then sew through the next crescent bead. and pull, and those beads will pop right into place. And don't worry if they start to sink down a little bit, we'll grab those on the next go around, but at least they're in place now. And then next we're going to take our needle and sew down through the open hole of that same crescent bead that we're coming out of. And we're going to pick up a new crescent by the right hand hole, sew down through the one that's in the middle, pick up another crescent also by the right hand hole, and then sew down through the open hole of the next crescent. All right, now we're going to take our needle and we're going to swing back through this section that is the one containing those 11 O's we had added in. We're going to go through the crescent, through that left-hand hole, and through the 11 O, also through the next crescent, left-hand hole. Grab that next 11 O, sew through that, and sew through the left-hand side of that next crescent. And you can just take your needle and pop those 11 O's up a little bit, but they will get placed once we keep going. Now with my needle coming up out of this hole, I'm going to swing back down going through the next hole of that same crescent. I'm also going to sew down through the next 3 crescent beads, just going through those holes that are lining up. Again, I'm not going through the 4th one. And that is because I'm going to turn around at this 3rd one and go through the open hole of that, then pick up an 8O and sew through the open hole of the next crescent bead and pull everything nice and tight. So now both of our sides match, and to make that 7.5-inch bracelet that you saw in the examples, we'll be making 5 of these types of sections, one right after the other. And of course, if you want to make your bracelet longer or shorter, just adjust the number of sections of these that you make. Feel free to add one, take one away, do whatever you need to do to make that the length that you want. To reinforce that area and to get to our 8O again, I'm going to swing back down through that same crescent, going through the other hole that's on the left, and go through the next 2 crescents, pull it again tight, and then I'm going to sew up through the right-hand side of the crescent that's below the 8O, and then I'm going to sew through the 8O. Then here is where we're going to be picking up a new 8O. We're going to add 2 of them in ladder stitch directly to this 8O. That's going to serve as a bridge between the 2 beaded sections. So with my 8O on, I'm going to sew back around the 8O that's already in place. Sew down through the new one. Pick up another 8O. Sew down through the previous one. And then up through the newest one. And then what I like to do is just go back through these 3 one more time, just weaving back and forth to reinforce the section, down through that one and up through the next one. So we're coming out of that last 8O, and we're going to start the same process all over again that you'll just keep repeating. And once again, when we get to that 8O section, it was a little bit different at the beginning. But to get you started with another section, what you'll do is you'll pick up a new crescent through the left-hand hole, then sew down through the open hole of that crescent, pick up a new crescent, this time through the right-hand hole, and then also pick up another crescent, this time through the left-hand hole. And now you'll take your needle and sew up through the open hole of that new crescent, sew through the 8O, and sew through the next crescent that is in alignment, pull, and then sew down through the next 3 crescents. And you'll just pick up at this part where you're going to be adding in another crescent on the bottom, connecting it to the middle, and adding another one on the top. So you'll just need to back up the video if you don't quite remember what to do. We'll be completing the exact same steps that we just did, and you'll repeat that as many times as you need to get the length of the bracelet that you want. And then when you get to your very last section, instead of doing the ladder stitch and adding on 2 additional 8-ohs, just stop with that one final 8-oh. That's where I'm going to meet you back, and I'll show you how I attach the clasp. And welcome back, everyone. This is what you should have, and as you can see, I've got the 5 different sections that we worked on, and I did go ahead and add one side of the clasp because the side we're going to do together, it's the exact same process. You'll just use that extra long tail thread if you have it, or add on some additional thread to that side. And to finish up the side that I'm working on, I'll just continue with the same thread that I have. Coming out of the 8-oh right here, and like I said before, we didn't add those extra 2 onto that, just leaving this as a single 8-oh seed bead. And there are so many different ways you can end a bracelet like this, so this is just one example of many. Feel free to use this if you'd like to, or do something different. But what I did in the examples was I added some of the 11-oh seed beads onto the 8-oh in ladder stitch. So similar to what we did before, where we pick up an 11-oh and go back through the 8-oh, and then sew down through the 11-oh again, pick up another 11-oh, this time go down through the last 11-oh, and go up through the new one. And then we're going to weave down through that first one again, and back through the 8-oh. And I'm going to do one more little strip like that connected to the 8-oh. So I'm going to pick up another 11-oh, go around the 8-oh again, go back through that same 11-oh we just added, pick up another 11-oh and go back through the previous 11-oh, sew up through that last one, down through the one before it, and through the 8-oh again. So what we have are these 2 little strips of 11-ohs connected, one on top of the other, to that 8-oh seed bead. And we're just going to attach the last 2 seed beads, the last one on either of those little strips, to the loop of our toggle clasp. So I'm going to go back down through the 11-oh I get to next, and then up through the last one on that section. And the loop will sit kind of like this in between those 2 strips. So I'm just going to feed on the loop of the toggle clasp. And we're just going to situate it so that it's sitting in the middle of those 2 loops. So I'm coming out of this seed bead right here, and I had picked up the loop of the toggle. Now I'm just going through the seed bead at the bottom. I'll turn this around a little bit. So here's another view of what we have so far, and I'm going to now go back up through the toggle clasp, and then I'm going to sew through the top seed bead at the end in the other direction, and then just do that same process 1 or 2 more times. So coming out of that top seed bead, now I'll go through the loop of the toggle clasp again, and then I'll go through the bottom seed bead, go up through the loop of the clasp, and over and through the seed bead at the top. So we've just added on that toggle clasp, as you can see, with the seed bead section on the top and the bottom of it. And I'm going to go around this just one more time to make sure it's super sturdy. All right, that feels great. And now I'm just gonna weave back and forth through these seed beads again to get my thread away from the end of the bracelet. And I'll weave in the thread just a little bit more and make a couple of half hitch knots before trimming off the excess thread. Just gonna weave back up through here a little bit, and I'll hide a knot right there, going underneath that thread bridge, making a loop and going through it like so. And doing that a couple more times. Also traveling through some beads in between to hide the knots and the thread. Out through there. And I'll probably just do one more knot right at that point and travel through some of these seed beads on the side. And go through a few more like that. That feels really good. And now I'll trim off the excess. So that's one way that you can end this bracelet, and like I said, you just do the same exact thing on the other side to match what we just did, and then your bracelet is complete. Here is a look at it wrapped around my wrist. You can see it's nice and slinky, has some great movement to it, and looks like a really cool woven chain, I think. Well, that is all for this tutorial. I want to thank you all so much for being here and joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed this project. Once again, you can find everything you need at Eureka Crystal Beads, either in the brand new Cozy Winter collection that I will link to down below, or just in general in their shop. They've got these items in all sorts of different colors and a whole lot more. If you decide to make this project, or if you plan to, I'd love to hear about it, so feel free to leave me a comment down below. Also, give the video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe while you're here and share the tutorial with your other beading friends. That's all I have for now, but I hope to see you all again real soon. And in the meantime, I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. And as always, happy beading.